So for those of you who have finished the Last of Us TV show, you know it did a fantastic job at adapting the source material. But it was not the first. Two other shows, in my opinion, also show how to do a video game adaptation right. And I believe looking at all three of them will give us a roadmap on how any studio deciding to adapt a video game should go in the future, and how the options are limitless. Also, I swear to God, if Amazon get the God of War thing wrong, I'm going to pull a Kratos on my Amazon Prime subscription. I couldn't even say that with a straight face. Let's start with the most recent one, HBO's The Last of Us. And I have to say, out of all these adaptations I'm going to talk about here today, in terms of accuracy, this is the best one. I'm sure many of you know that accuracy seems to be the most important thing when people talk about adaptation. And I think for stories like this, it works brilliantly. I have my own issues with the show, which I might talk about at some point. For example, how they kind of made one of the characters a little softer than he was in the game. But to be fair, he doesn't show up for very long. But I did feel the impact a lot more in the video game, because his actions led to Ellie getting closer with another character, and it made what happened that just extra bit more sadder. But aside from that, I don't have too many issues. To be fair though, especially with video games that are based in the real world, where there's less CGI involved, I think sticking to the script is the best way to go. For example, if I were you and we were adapting a Call of Duty movie, I would adapt either the Modern Warfare series, the original one, or the first two Black Ops games. In relative order, of course, just taking out a few fetch quests so it's easier to watch. You know, I feel like that showed in the ratings for The Last of Us when they stuck to the script, because everyone loved it. You know, people who had already seen it liked it because of the extra content they added. But that's important because it didn't take away from what was in the game. It only added. And that's a fine line to cross, you know? I mean, look what happened with Harry Potter and Star Wars when they tried to add stuff that just kind of ruined the mystique of everything. Seriously though, Harry Potter's weird. I think that keeping existing fans is definitely important, but more importantly is bringing in that new audience. Because for a while I always thought that people could just play the game, right? But you don't realize the vast difference in the medium that is a video game, right? I've been trying to get my dad to play The Last of Us for about a year now. And we even got him to try and play the Modern Warfare campaign. But because obviously I've been playing games since I was a kid, some of the simple stuff like how to move or how to shoot is second nature to me. But it takes like 30 minutes to get them to understand. That's not a problem, right? But it does ruin their experience because people don't like to seem like an idiot, right? When you're trying to teach someone how to walk, even though it's virtual, it makes people seem stupid, even if they're not. And that annoys them, and so they never pick up a video game again. But using TV to explore these stories is a great way to allow people who will never play a video game in their lives to enjoy a beautifully crafted story by amazingly talented people. We don't have to gatekeep these products from people. Just let them enjoy it. But I also feel that's why accuracy is so important. Because if you adapt something terribly and ruin the overall impression of it, the impact that has on fans might be a bit overblown, but it's still a pain in the hole to explain to someone why something you've hyped up for years is actually better than that piece of garbage they showed on TV. Not to mention the fact that a good adaptation will get people to consume the source material to get ahead, you know what I mean? Think of anime and manga, for example, where people always read the manga to get ahead of the anime because they're really engrossed in the series. Or hell, even what happened to Ellie and Joel, right? People want to see what happened there, so they pick up The Last of Us Part 2, which makes everything come full circle, and the return on investment of putting that extra effort / money into it works out in the end. Rather than that filthy capitalism ruining my art like Dragon Ball Evolution. That shit was terrible. And I'm gonna convert to communism. Let's go, baby. No, but that was honestly the worst I've ever seen. It's terrible. That movie was unapologetically horrendous. All because someone wanted a bit of extra money. Lads, if I've never... It's terrible. It is so bad. Awful. But accuracy is not the only way to adapt a video game. I think this is best shown in my favourite adaptation, Castlevania by Netflix. This show technically takes from the story in the game, but because the game was retro, I believe it was a GBA game, they can't pull much from it, right? So they branched out and made it into their own thing. But it still keeps the core elements of the franchise and didn't sway from what made people love it while still expressing their own vision. And I think that's brilliant. I mean, to be honest, I never cared about Castlevania until I watched this show, So to me, everything I talk about in this video, about how adapting your story into a different medium can grow your initial market, happened to me with this show. I watched this show, absolutely adored it, wanted to play the games now. Konami didn't capitalize on it. There hasn't been a new Castlevania game in years, but the idea is still there. If they ever make one, I will be scooping that up like nobody's business, because I'm now invested in this franchise through watching the series. It is also one of the only good Netflix originals, so I think that's a nice bonus. Although this brings up a great dichotomy. Video games tend to be a little bit unrealistic. A lot of them anyways. I know not Call of Duty and FIFA, but I mean stuff like Zelda, Xenoblade, Pokemon, and The Witcher. That would take a lot of CGI and live action to make a TV show look good. And we know even Marvel, the biggest cash cow in modern movie history, can't afford consistently good CGI. I mean, why do you think people are worried about the One Piece live action? A real life rubber guy? That is not going to end well, but we live in hope, right? That's why, in my opinion, animation is a great way to adapt video games because it allows you to keep that somewhat unrealistic aesthetic while also having the audience accept it. Because it's a lot easier to accept crazy stuff in animation because you can make it look like it fits within the world. Whereas when you have a live action show, we live in that world, of course. So it seems a lot more out of place. That's why I think it's another brilliant example of this that came out while I was writing the script, which was the Super Mario movie, that captured the aesthetic of Mario, the feel of Mario, almost perfectly. And we saw what happened when they did that live action, right? So deciding which medium is best for your adaptation is very important. That's why adapting animation to live action never really works. And that's why, especially when you're thinking of how to adapt your video game, you have to think about how many unrealistic things show up in that. The final approach could be argued to be the best because it does nothing but add to the original without encroaching on the original's territory at all. Just taking from the world and putting stories in it. You know, you're not technically adapting the game, you're just telling a story within the world. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is the prime example of this. There's no mention of them in the game story, right? They have no impact on the story in the game. It doesn't occur within the game. It just uses the cyberpunk world to tell a beautiful tale. And honestly, I think you could argue this is the best way to do it because you're just adding lore to the world. And you know, think of Star Wars Visions. I know that's not a video game, but it still shows you areas of the world that we've never seen before. Or even Batman Beyond. Right, you can use animation to tell stories that aren't connected to the original, but still adds to the franchise as a whole. And I think Edgerunners is a fantastic example of this. And Trigger didn't mess up a show for once, so fair play, lads. With all that being said, I think The Last of Us, Castlevania, and Cyberpunk Edgerunners are all perfect blueprints for the future video game adaptations. And I think many directors or studios should watch these three shows before deciding to adapt their licensed material and decide which of these amazing series they should follow to create the next hit. That's why I believe these three shows are the pillars of video game adaptations. And they give me hope for the future. I'm really excited to see what's next. Hopefully we're getting a Zelda movie, boys! And with that being said, to be fair, if you haven't picked up Zelda Tears of the Kingdom yet, because it's out on Friday when I'm recording this, pick it up, will you? I want to see if it's better than one, so we gotta figure this out. Tell me which one you prefer, Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I'm very curious to know. And that's it from me today. Thanks for watching.